Lee Cronin's The Mummy has finally unveiled itself at the cinema. It's a mix of old school monster and new school gore. But does this stay fresh, or does it just completely unravel? The young daughter of a journalist disappears into the desert without a trace. 8 years later, the broken family is shocked when she is returned to them. But what should be a joyful reunion turns into a living nightmare. This modern take on the mummy coming back to life idea embraces a lot of the supernatural and the gruesome as we watch this kidnapped young girl be found alive 8 years later, mummified and in a terrible state. But once she gets back home, that's when the troubles really begin. We've got Jack Rayner, Leia Costa, May Kalamaui, and Natalie Grace, who portrays the psychotically preserved living dead doll Katie. The storytelling vacillates between wanting to be a horror and a mysterious thriller. Now, for a lot of it, the story revolves around who took Katie and why, even after she's been found. And the why is still a central story arc because the why will help to answer the what the hell is going on here question. We can tell through some fantastic makeup that Katie's in terrible shape after being unearned from her mummification. Her skin is plasticky and thin with a waxy, rotted appearance. Her nails, they haven't been trimmed in 8 years, and the back of her head is matted worse than a cocker's ears after a month of no brushing. Now, the makeup and the prosthetics team, they deserve a ton of kudos because the whole presence of Katie, it is unsettling, even stomach-turning. With one look, we know that nothing is right with her. And through the pained facial expressions of Rayner and Costa, who play her parents, they can also tell that all may not be well with Katie. So I enjoyed the story for this, and I was certainly intrigued by the mystery, which does delve into some mildly satisfying lore. But the largest struggle I had with the entire thing was the length, which then made the storytelling unevenly paced and dragged out. Now, I don't mind lengthy films, as long as their arcs remain compelling. Here, the core story was engaging, the acting is wonderful, and then we get the gory moments. I mean, they're just squirm-inducing and nasty. But it's the in-between moments where there's too much brooding and not enough progression. When the story loses its momentum and even focus, shifting gears suddenly from a supernatural story that's delving into the horror to then becoming a police procedural. And even when the story centered around the more freaky elements, I was never scared, even overly tense. I mean, I appreciated that some of that held a bit of creepiness to it, but my main reaction to any of the actiony bits was just grossed out enthusiasm. The gore's on point, and it's delivered in ways that you think you know what's coming, and then it is way worse than you could have imagined. It's kind of like in Cronin's Evil Dead Rise with the cheese grater. There's creativity here in a lot of the nastiness, but it never rises to the level of something that gets under the skin and then delivers heebie-jeebies. Now, I do want to go back to the lore for a moment. It starts out by showing us a mysterious object filled with unsettling carvings, and then we get to see a little bit more. Now, the answer to what was actually transpiring, it doesn't come until much later in the film, which I think is totally great and appropriate. But we only really get a small smattering of information and background on the mythos that's at the center. It's not a unique idea, especially when there are so many supernaturally themed stories available. But this was at least using new names and beings, so it wasn't a full-on rehash of borrowed ideas. I think the presentation, though, feels most similar to the autopsy of Jane Doe, both in some of the plot points and then the ramifications of unearthing a body that was meant to stay buried. Outside of that, though, there was ample opportunity, especially within the 133 minutes, to take more time and then go deeper into the impetus that led to Katie's disappearance and then mummification. The way most of this information is presented, it feels normal within the plot, but it's actually kind of just tossed into the middle to provide a little explanation while also giving Jack Rayner's character something to do other than sit pensively in the home, helpless to affect any changes in his daughter. I appreciate the acting and how the cast created a believable family connection, but that's only at the beginning. We reach a point when all of the characters' actions and decisions, they just become standard horror fare, falling into the same behaviors that are present in so many other films that it just becomes predictable, canceling the suspense or the dread that it was desperately attempting to craft. I mean, I really wanted to love this, heck, even just like it more than I did. I think the premise is a good one, taking the traditional mummy idea and then giving it a twist. And even with borrowed ideas and themes, the potential was there to reinvigorate the genre, melding some family trauma with vulnerable children while malevolence just threatens them all. Unfortunately, though, the narrative can't decide where it wants to place the focus. Does it want to be a thriller, examining ancient lore while showcasing some unsettling imagery, or does it want to be a gruesome horror intent on turning stomachs while we twist in discomfort at the imagery that's being thrust on us? Either one would have been great, but the story attempts to do both and then ends up doing neither in a remarkable or spectacular manner. The makeup, prosthetics, and visual effects, they're excellently achieved, creating imagery that is insanely nasty, hitting the gross out mark at every turn. The acting is done well also, especially from Natalie Grace in the mummified role, contorting her body and creating unnatural expressions designed to bore into our souls. But with unfocused progressions, lengthy and sometimes meandering storytelling, and then a general lack of any sort of fear or chills, the movie just becomes a run-of-the-mill attempt at horror that's just kinda okay. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and a bunch of violence. I give Lee Cronin's The Mummy 2.5 out of 5 couches. Now, you don't want to be snacking during a lot of this, but you also don't necessarily want to shell out full price at the cinema like I did. Either see it at a matinee or just wait for streaming if you're really intent on giving it a watch. Alright, I'm looking for a movie that is rich with lore, but also can deliver on the plot. I don't care the genre, I just need a good win. So let me know some suggestions in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.